50 years passed behind the shroud. The galaxy forgot about Earth. The Valkyries celebrated their victory and continued their rule. They believed the human problem had been solved forever. They were very wrong. Danny Lynn stood in an underground hangar so large that clouds formed near its ceiling. He was 60 years old now, with gray hair and tired eyes. But his mind was as sharp as ever. He was the grandson of Sam Carter, the man who had promised that Earth would never fade quietly. Danny had spent his entire life making sure the promise would be kept. Around him, thousands of workers moved with purpose. They welded metal plates on the massive ship frames. They installed engines that glowed with strange blue light. They carried weapons that no galactic species had ever seen before. "How many ships are ready?" Danny asked. Kate Walsh walked up beside him. She was the chief engineer of Project Phoenix, the secret program that had consumed Earth's resources for the past 3 decades. Her hands were rough from work. Her face was lined with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with fierce pride. 47 warships are fully complete, Kate reported. Another 60 will be ready within the year. The rest will take longer, but we are ahead of schedule. Danny nodded slowly. When the Shroud first trapped them, humanity had almost given up hope. Resources were limited. Technology was not advanced enough to break through the barrier. Many believed they would simply wait and die. But humans did not know how to simply wait and die. Cut off from galactic rules and restrictions. Human scientists began experimenting with technologies that the Concord had banned as too dangerous. They explored ideas that had been forbidden. They pushed boundaries that had been set by alien laws. And they made discoveries that changed everything. Kate led Danny deeper into the hangar. They stopped before a ship that looked unlike anything else. It was sleek and dark, covered in panels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This is the prototype for our dimensional drive," Kate explained. "It does not just move through normal space. It moves through the space between dimensions. Nothing in the Concord can track it. Nothing can stop it." Danny touched the cold metal of the ship. "Can it break through the shroud?" Kate smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. "We tested it yesterday. The drive punched a hole through the barrier for 3 seconds before we pulled back. The shroud is not unbreakable, Danny. We can get through." Danny felt something shift in his chest. For 50 years, the shroud had been their prison. For 50 years, they had lived in a cage built by alien overlords. Now that cage had a door. "How soon can we be ready for a full breakthrough?" Danny asked. 15 years, Kate answered. "Maybe 10 if we push harder. We need more ships. We need more weapons. When we go through that barrier, we cannot fail. We will only get one chance to show the galaxy what we have become." Danny understood. The Valkyrie would not give them a second opportunity. If humanity broke through the shroud and failed to defend themselves, the Overlords would simply destroy Earth completely. They had to emerge strong enough to make that impossible. He walked to another section of the hangar where Chris Dunn trained soldiers. Chris was a military strategist who had spent his life preparing for a war that might never come. Now that war was finally within reach. "How are the troops?" Danny asked. Chris gestured to the training floor below. Hundreds of soldiers moved through combat exercises. They were fast, precise, and deadly. They had trained their entire lives for this moment. "Best fighting force Earth has ever produced," Chris said proudly. "They are faster than anything the Concord has seen. Stronger too, thanks to our medical advances. And more importantly, they are motivated. Every single one of them knows what was done to us. Every single one of them has a grandfather or grandmother who was forced back to Earth and stripped of everything. This fight is personal for them." Danny watched the soldiers train. They moved like water, flowing from one position to another without hesitation. The Valkyrie had expected humans to become weak behind the shroud. Instead, they had become something far more dangerous. The Overlords made a mistake, Danny said quietly. They thought cutting us off would stop us. Instead, they removed all the rules that were holding us back. Chris nodded. When we were part of the Concord, we had to follow their technology restrictions. We had to limit our research. We had to ask permission for everything. Behind the shroud, we answered to no one but ourselves. Danny thought about his grandfather Sam. The old man had died 20 years ago, still believing that Earth would rise again. He never got to see the ships being built. He never got to see the weapons being forged. But his faith had kept humanity going during the darkest years. Grandfather always said that humans were different, Danny said. He said other species accepted their place in the galaxy. They followed the rules. They stayed in their lanes. But humans always asked why. We always pushed for more. We never accepted that something was impossible just because someone told us it was. Kate and Chris stood beside him, looking out at the hangar full of ships and soldiers and hope. The galaxy thinks we are dead, Kate said. They think the shroud killed us slowly over 50 years. Danny smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had waited his entire life for revenge. Let them think that, he said. Let them believe we faded away. Let them forget we ever existed. And then, when we break through that barrier, let them see what happens when you try to bury humanity alive. The workers continued building. The soldiers continued training. The scientists continued inventing. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in hangars that stretched for miles, humanity prepared for war. They had been given 50 years of silence, 50 years of isolation, 50 years to build without interference. The Overlords thought the shroud was a death sentence. They were about to discover it had been a cocoon, and the creature emerging from that cocoon would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. Danny. Lynn turned and walked back toward his command center. There was still work to do. Ships to build. Soldiers to train. Plans to make. The day of reckoning was coming. And when it arrived, the universe would learn an important lesson about humanity. Don't never give them a reason to fight. And never, ever give them time to prepare. The day Earth died to the galaxy began like any other morning. Captain Sam Carter stood in the observation deck of the Earth Defense Station, watching the blue planet spin slowly below him. He had served humanity for 30 years. He had seen first contact with the Valkyrie. He had watched Earth join the Galactic Concord with hope and excitement. Now he was about to watch all of that end. The message had arrived 1 hour ago. Every screen on Earth displayed the same words. The Galactic Concord, under the authority of the Valkyrie Overlords, had declared humanity guilty of violations against galactic law. The punishment was immediate and final. Banishment. Sam read the words again, hoping they might change. They did not. Earth and its solar system would be sealed behind an energy barrier called the Shroud. No ship could pass through it. No signal could escape it. Humanity would be cut off from the galaxy forever. Lisa Monroe, his chief scientist and oldest friend, walked up beside him. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. She held a datapad filled with information she had spent the last hour gathering. "They are lying," she said quietly. "The reasons they gave are not real." Sam turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Lisa handed him the datapad. "They said we violated population controls. They said we consumed too many resources. They said we expanded too fast." She shook her head. "None of that is true. We followed every rule. We asked permission for every colony. We did everything they demanded. Then why?" Sam asked. Lisa pulled up a chart showing human technological progress over the past 80 years. The line went almost straight up. Because of this, when we joined the Concorde, our technology was 1,000 years behind the Valkyrie. Now look at us. In just 80 years, we have nearly caught up to species that have existed for millions of years. Sam understood immediately. They are afraid of us. Terrified, Lisa confirmed. The Valkyrie have ruled the galaxy for so long because no one could challenge them. But humans learn too fast. We adapt too quickly. We create things they never imagined. Given another 100 years, we might surpass them completely. A young officer named Ben Torres ran up to them. His face was covered in sweat. He had been monitoring communications from the Concorde fleet that now surrounded Earth's solar system. "Captain, the barrier is activating," Ben reported. "They are starting the shroud." Sam walked quickly to the main window. In the distance, he could see it forming. A wall of purple energy spread across space like a curtain being drawn. It moved slowly but steadily, cutting off escape routes one by one. "How long do we have?" Sam asked. "Less than an hour before the barrier is complete," Ben answered. "And sir, there is something else. They are sending all humans back from the colonies. Every colony we built is being stripped. Our people are being loaded onto transport ships and returned to Earth. Anyone who resists is being killed." Sam felt something cold settle in his chest. Billions of humans had built lives on those colonies. They had raised families there. They had built cities and farms and dreams. Now they were being torn away from everything and thrown back to Earth like trash dog. Lisa gripped his arm. "We cannot fight them, Sam. Their fleet is too large. Their weapons are too advanced. If we resist, they will destroy us completely." Sam knew she was right. The Valkyrie had ruled the galaxy for a reason. Their technology was ancient and powerful. Earth's small defense fleet would be destroyed in minutes if it tried to fight. But something burned inside Sam, a fire that would not go out. His grandfather had told him stories about Earth's history. Stories of times when humans faced impossible situations and refused to give up. Stories of survival against all odds. He watched the shroud continue to grow. Purple light filled the sky. Soon it would surround them completely. Soon Earth would be alone in the darkness. "Get me a channel to the planet," Sam said quietly. Ben worked the controls. "Channel open, sir. Every screen on Earth can see you." Sam straightened his uniform. He looked into the camera. 8 billion people were watching him. 8 billion frightened souls waiting to hear what their future would hold. "People of Earth," Sam began. "By now you have heard the news. The Galactic Concorde has banished us. In less than 1 hour, we will be sealed behind a barrier that no ship can cross. We will be cut off from the galaxy. We will be alone." He paused. He could almost feel the fear spreading across the planet below. "They want us to believe this is a punishment. They want us to believe we did something wrong. But I have learned the truth. We are not being banished because we are criminals. We are being banished because we are a threat. In just 80 years, humanity has advanced more than species that have existed for millions of years. The Overlords are not punishing us. They are afraid of us." Sam stepped closer to the camera. His voice grew stronger. "They expect us to wither and die behind this barrier. They expect us to fade into silence and be forgotten. They expect us to give up." His eyes hardened. They do not know humans very well. On the observation deck, Lisa watched with tears in her eyes. Ben stood at attention, his fear replaced by something else. Something that looked like hope. "We will not fade," Sam continued. "We will not be forgotten. We will not give up. Behind this barrier, away from their rules and their control, we will do what humans have always done. We will survive. We will grow. We will learn. And one day, when that barrier falls, the galaxy will see what happens when you try to cage humanity. The shroud completed its formation. Purple energy surrounded the entire solar system. Earth was now cut off from everything beyond. Sam ended his broadcast. He stood in silence, watching the barrier shimmer in the darkness of space. Lisa walked up beside him. That was a bold promise. Can we keep it? Sam did not look away from the barrier. We have no choice. Either we find a way to keep that promise, or we prove them right about us. He finally turned to face her. And I refuse to prove them right. Outside, the shroud pulsed with alien energy. It was meant to be a prison. It was meant to be a grave. But deep inside that barrier, on a small blue planet, 8 billion humans began to plan. They began to build. They began to dream of the day they would return. The Overlords had made a terrible mistake. They had locked humanity in a cage and expected them to die. Instead, they had given humans something far more dangerous than freedom. They had given them a reason to fight. 65 years after the banishment, the day finally arrived. Megan Cruz sat in the cockpit of her ship, hands steady on the controls. She was 28 years old. She had never seen the galaxy beyond the shroud. She had never met an alien species. She had never known anything but the purple barrier that surrounded her entire world. Today, that would change. Around her, 200 warships waited in formation. They were beautiful and terrifying. Their hulls were black as night. Their weapons hummed with power that no galactic species had ever seen. They were the result of 65 years of human determination. Admiral Pete Lawson's voice came through the communication system. He was aboard the command ship, coordinating the entire fleet. His grandfather had been one of the colonists dragged back to Earth during the banishment. The old man had died still dreaming of revenge. Now Pete would deliver it. All ships, this is Admiral Lawson. Status report. One by one, the ship captains reported in. All systems were ready. All weapons were charged. All crews were prepared to die if necessary. Megan checked her own systems. Her ship was smaller than the warships, designed for speed and agility. She had been chosen to lead the first squadron through the barrier. If something went wrong, she would be the first to die. That she was not afraid. Fear had been trained out of her years ago. She felt only cold determination and a hunger that had burned in her chest since childhood. A hunger to see the stars that had been stolen from her people. Danny Lynn's face appeared on her screen. The old man was now over 120 years old, kept alive by medical advances that would have seemed like magic to his grandfather. His eyes were tired but bright with emotion. Megan, Danny said, you know what this moment means. 65 years ago, my grandfather made a promise to Earth. He said we would not fade quietly. He said we would return. Today, you will keep that promise. Megan nodded. I understand, sir. The galaxy believes we are dead. They believe the shroud killed us long ago. When you break through that barrier, you will not just be leading a fleet. You will be announcing to the entire universe that humanity has returned. Danny paused. Make sure they remember the announcement. The communication ended. Megan gripped her controls tighter. Around her, the fleet began moving toward the shroud. The purple energy barrier pulsed in the distance, blocking out the stars beyond. Admiral Lawson gave the order. Activate dimensional drives. Prepare for barrier breach. The ships hummed with power. Blue light surrounded each vessel as the dimensional drives engaged. This was technology that the Concord had banned as too dangerous. This was technology that humans had perfected in secret. Megan watched the barrier grow closer. It had imprisoned her people for 65 years. It had cut them off from everything. It had been meant to be their grave. All ships, breach in 30 seconds, Lawson announced. the fleet accelerated. The shroud filled the entire view. Purple energy crackled and sparked as the ships approached. 20 seconds. Megan thought about her parents, who had told her stories of the colonies that were stolen. She thought about her grandparents, who had been dragged back to Earth like criminals. She thought about every human who had lived and died behind this barrier. 10 seconds. The dimensional drives reached full power. Reality itself seemed to bend around the ships. Breach now. The fleet hit the shroud like a hammer striking glass. For one terrible moment, everything went white. Megan felt her ship shake violently. Alarms screamed. Lights flickered. Then silence. Megan opened her eyes. The purple energy was gone. In front of her stretched endless black space filled with stars. Real stars. Stars she had never seen before. "We are through," she whispered. The communication system exploded with voices. All 200 ships had made it through the barrier. The shroud had been broken. Admiral Lawson's voice cut through the noise. All ships formed defensive positions. "We do not know how quickly the Concorde will respond." Megan looked at her sensors. The nearby space was empty for now, but she knew that would not last. Breaking the shroud would trigger alarms across the galaxy. The Valkyrie would know immediately that their prison had failed. "Squadron leaders, report." Lawson ordered. Megan responded with her squadron. All ships were intact. All weapons were ready. They had done it. After 65 years, humanity had escaped. Danny Lin's voice returned to the communication system. But this time, he was not speaking to the fleet. He was broadcasting to the entire galaxy. "This message is for the Galactic Concorde and the Valkyrie Overlords," Danny began. His voice was calm and cold. 65 years ago, you sealed Earth behind a barrier of energy. You expected us to wither. You expected us to die. You expected us to be forgotten. Megan imagined the message spreading across space. She imagined alien species hearing these words for the first time. She imagined the shock and fear spreading through the Concorde. "You were wrong," Danny continued. "We did not wither. We did not die. We grew stronger. We built ships beyond anything you have ever seen. We developed weapons that your scientists said were impossible. And now we have broken through your barrier." The fleet held position, waiting for orders. Every pilot listened to the message that would change galactic history. "Earth remembers what you did to us. Earth remembers the colonies you stole. Earth remembers the families you destroyed. And now Earth has returned." Danny paused. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 65 years of anger. "We are not asking for our place in the galaxy. We are not requesting permission to exist. We are not begging for mercy. We are coming. And nothing you have will be enough to stop us." The message ended. Silence filled the fleet. Then Admiral Lawson gave the order that every human had dreamed of for generations. "All ships, set course for Valkyrie space. It is time to remind the Overlords why they feared us." The fleet moved as one. 200 human warships cut through the darkness of space, heading toward the heart of the Empire that had tried to destroy them. The galaxy had thought Earth was dead. The galaxy was about to learn just how alive humanity really was. And when the lessons were over, nothing would ever be the same again. The Valkyrie had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered species that no longer existed. They had crushed rebellions that had seemed unstoppable. They had built an empire so vast that no one could imagine its end. Supreme, Archon Kethful had led the Concorde for 3 centuries. He had made the decision to banish Earth all those years ago. He had signed the order that sealed humanity behind the shroud. He had celebrated when the barrier was complete, believing the human threat was ended forever. Now he stood in his command chamber, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. The reports all said the same thing. Human ships were cutting through Concord defenses like they did not exist. Human weapons were destroying Veltari fleets in minutes. Human soldiers were capturing bases that had stood unconquered for thousands of years. How is this possible? Kethvil demanded. His voice echoed through the chamber. His advisors stood in fearful silence. None of them had answers. A new report arrived. Another fleet destroyed. Another system captured. The humans were moving faster than any species the Veltari had ever faced. They struck without warning and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Their ships moved in ways that Veltari sensors could not track. They were supposed to be dead, Kethvil said. The Shroud was supposed to kill them. 65 years with no resources, no trade, no contact with the galaxy. They should have collapsed within a decade. One of his advisors finally spoke. Supreme Archon, our intelligence suggests that Earth used the isolation to develop new technologies. Technologies that we banned as too dangerous. Kethvil turned to face the advisor. You are telling me that by cutting them off from our rules, we gave them freedom to break those rules? The advisor lowered his eyes. Yes, Supreme Archon. It appears our punishment became their advantage. Kethvil felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. Real, cold fear spreading through his ancient body. He had underestimated humans. He believed they were like other species. He'd been catastrophically wrong. Far across the galaxy, Megan Cruz led her squadron through another battle. 3 Veltari warships faced her. They were massive vessels, each one crewed by thousands. They had weapons that had terrified the galaxy for millennia. Megan destroyed them in 47 seconds. Her ship moved through space like nothing the Veltari had ever seen. It dodged their weapons effortlessly. It struck their shields with projectiles that ignored their defenses. It danced around their slow, clumsy attacks like they were standing still. Squadron, form up, Megan ordered. Admiral Lawson wants us at the Vulcar system within 2 hours. Her pilots responded instantly. They were young, like her. They had grown up training for this war. They had spent their entire lives preparing to face enemies their grandparents had only told stories about, and now they were discovering something important. The stories had made the Veltari seem like gods. The reality was very different. The Overlords were ancient, yes. Powerful, yes. But they were also slow. They were rigid. They had not faced a real challenge in thousands of years. Humans were a real challenge. Admiral Lawson coordinated the campaign from his command ship. Reports came in constantly. Human victories everywhere. Concord forces retreating on every front. Species that had been oppressed by the Veltari for centuries were watching with growing hope. Admiral, the Velcar system is reporting surrender, an officer announced. The local governor wants to negotiate terms. Lawson smiled grimly. Tell them we do not negotiate. We liberate. Their system will be free, but not under Veltari rule. Under no one's rule. That is our only term. The message was sent. The system surrendered completely. Word spread across the galaxy. The humans were not conquering. They were freeing. This shocked the Concord almost as much as the military defeats. For thousands of years, war had meant conquest. War had meant slavery. War had meant the strong taking everything from the weak. The humans were doing something different. They were destroying Veltari military forces, yes. They were capturing Veltari leaders, yes. But they were not enslaving populations. They were not burning cities. They were not taking revenge on innocent civilians. Kethvil watched these reports with growing confusion. He could not understand what the humans were doing. They had every right to be cruel. The Veltari had stolen their colonies. The Veltari had imprisoned them for 65 years. The Valkyrie had expected them to die, yet the humans showed mercy. Not weakness, but deliberate, calculated mercy. The war continued for months. Human forces pushed deeper into Concord territory. Valkyrie fleets fell one after another. Worlds that had lived under Overlord rule for thousands of years suddenly found themselves free. Finally, the human fleet reached the Valkyrie homeworld. It was a massive planet, covered in cities that had stood for millions of years. It was the heart of the Concord. It was the seat of power for the Overlords, who had ruled the galaxy since before most species existed. Admiral Lawson brought his fleet into orbit. 1,000 human warships surrounded the planet. Their weapons could have burned the surface clean of life in hours, but no shots were fired. Lawson broadcast a simple message to the planet below. This is Admiral Pete Lawson of the Earth Liberation Fleet. Your military forces have been defeated. Your empire has fallen. You have two choices. Surrender peacefully, or watch everything your species built be destroyed. We give you 1 hour to decide. The response came in 20 minutes. Total surrender. The Valkyrie population had no desire to die for leaders who had already failed them. The Overlords had ruled through fear, not loyalty. Now that fear was gone, so was their power. Human soldiers landed on the planet without resistance. They moved through ancient cities, past monuments that had stood for millions of years. The Valkyrie civilians watched them pass with a mixture of terror and wonder. They had expected monsters. They found something else entirely. Megan Cruz was part of the team that captured Kethvil himself. They found him in his command chamber, surrounded by advisors who had already surrendered. The Supreme Archon stood alone, refusing to kneel. "You have won," Kethvil said. His voice was bitter. "What do you want, revenge? You wish to execute me publicly? Torture me? Make me suffer as your people suffered?" Megan looked at the ancient Overlord. He had signed the order that imprisoned her entire species. He had expected them to die in silence. He had been wrong about everything. "No," she said simply. "We want something much worse than revenge." She gestured for her soldiers to take him into custody. Kethvil was led away in chains, still not understanding what the humans had planned. He would understand soon enough, and the answer would haunt him for the rest of his very long life. 1 year after Earth's return, the galaxy had changed forever. The old order was gone. The Valkyrie Empire had fallen. The Concord that had ruled through fear and control had been swept away. Like dust in a storm, in its place stood something new. Something that no one had expected. Admiral Megan Cruz stood before representatives from 100 different species. They had gathered on a neutral world to hear humanity's plans for the galaxy. Many expected conquest. Many expected slavery. Many expected humans to become the new overlords, just as cruel as the old ones. They were wrong. For 10,000 years, this galaxy was ruled by fear. Megan began. Her voice carried across the massive chamber. The Valkyrie decided which species lived and which died. They decided who could advance and who would be held back. They decided who deserved freedom and who deserved chains. The alien representatives listened in silence. Some had served the Valkyrie faithfully for centuries. Others had suffered under their rule for just as long. All of them wondered what would come next. Humanity was banished because we grew too fast. We learned too quickly. We asked too many questions. Megan paused. The Overlords saw us as a threat. They expected this route to kill us. Instead, it made us stronger. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species who had watched the war with growing amazement. We could have done what they expected. We could have returned with vengeance in our hearts. We could have burned their worlds and enslaved their people. We had the power. We had the right. They tried to kill us. They tried to erase us from history. Megan shook her head slowly. but that is not who we are. Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was not the speech anyone had expected. Humanity is announcing the formation of the Galactic Commonwealth, Megan declared. Not an empire. Not a concord. A commonwealth. Every species will have an equal voice. There will be no overlords. There will be no banishments. There will be no shrouds. The murmurs grew louder. Some representatives looked suspicious. Others looked hopeful. After 10,000 years of tyranny, the idea of freedom seemed almost impossible to believe. We do not want to rule you, Megan continued. We want to work beside you. The galaxy has been held back for too long by fear and control. Imagine what we could accomplish together if every species was free to grow. Free to learn. Free to ask questions without fear. Far from the chamber, on a prison world reserved for the most dangerous criminals, Kethvol sat in his cell and listened to the broadcast. He had expected execution. He had expected torture. He had expected the humans to make him suffer as his victims had suffered. Instead, they had given him something far worse. They had given him a window to watch everything he believed be proven wrong. Guards came to his cell. They led him to a viewing platform where he could see the Commonwealth being born. He watched species that had served him faithfully now embrace human leadership. He watched worlds that had feared him now celebrate their freedom. A human officer stood beside him. This is your punishment, she said quietly. Not death, not pain, just watching. Kethvol did not respond. He could not. For 3 centuries, he had believed that the galaxy needed strong rulers. He had believed that species needed to be controlled or they would destroy each other. He had believed that fear was the only tool that worked. The humans were proving him wrong with every passing moment. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years were now talking peacefully. Worlds that had been stripped of resources were being helped to rebuild. The fear that had held the galaxy together was being replaced by something else entirely. Hope. Back on Earth. Danny Lin watched the broadcast from his home. He was now over 120 years old. His body was tired. His time was running short. But his heart was full of a peace he had never expected to feel. His granddaughter sat beside him. She held his hand as they watched the new galaxy take shape. Grandfather would have loved to see this, Danny said quietly. He was thinking of Sam Carter, the man who had made the promise so many years ago. The man who had sworn that Earth would not fade quietly. He sees it, his granddaughter replied. Wherever he is, he sees it. Danny smiled. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps somewhere, in some way, the souls of all those who had lived and died behind the shroud were watching. Perhaps they finally had peace. Megan Cruz finished her speech to applause that shook the chamber. Species that had never agreed on anything were now united in hope for a better future. It would not be easy. Old hatreds would take time to heal. Old wounds would take generations to close. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy had a chance to be something better. After the ceremony, Megan stood alone on an observation deck. She looked out at the stars that had been stolen from her people for 65 years. She thought about all the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. The engineers who had built impossible ships. The soldiers who had fought impossible battles. The dreamers who had refused to give up hope. A communication came through. It was from Earth, from Danny Lin himself. You did well, Danny said. His voice was weak but warm. You kept the promise. We all kept it, Megan replied. Everyone who ever lived behind the shroud. Everyone who refused to give up. This belongs to all of them. Danny nodded slowly. When my grandfather made that promise, people thought he was crazy. They thought he was just trying to make everyone feel better. But he believed it. He truly believed that humanity would find a way. He was right, Megan said. Yes, Danny agreed. He was. And now the galaxy will never forget what humans are capable of. Not destruction. Not conquest. Something much more powerful than that. What? Megan asked. Danny smiled. It was the last smile he would ever give, but it was filled with more joy than any that had come before. Hope, he said. We gave them hope. And that is something the Overlords could never understand. The communication ended. Megan stood alone under the stars, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. The universe had feared what humans might do with freedom. They had expected violence. They had expected revenge. They had expected humanity to become exactly what they had fought against. Instead, humans had shown them something different. They had shown that strength did not require cruelty. That power did not require oppression. That winning did not require destroying everything in your path. The shroud had been meant to be a grave. Instead, it had become a forge. And from that forge had emerged not conquerors, not tyrants, not overlords, just humans. Imperfect, stubborn, determined humans who refused to let the darkness win. And in the end, that had been enough to change everything.